I think, can you move up a little bit? Just, I think the second sentence, he said that this proved the point about how integrated our economies are, and he didn't seem to see this as a positive. He brought that up. And you have to kind of bear in mind, I have been bugging the guy, and Canadians have been nagging Americans since the fall. And we've been saying, guys, you don't understand Canada. You don't understand how integrated our economies are. This approach you're taking to the EVs, it's completely counterproductive for you because we work so closely together. Those parts, they cross the border 6 times. We've been saying this over and over. And so he comes back at me and he says, yeah, okay, like, you've made the point. We get it. And it was a surprise to him, actually, the extent to which their car industry was dependent on the trade with Canada. But that was a dangerous moment for Canada, I felt. Very, very dangerous, because the US then and now, as part of their own soft landing from COVID, something that is happening there is a real move to protect the supply chains of the United States. The same supply chain challenges I was talking about earlier as affecting Canada affected the US. And I think we have all seen a very strong push this year by Americans to insulate their supply chains, particularly from China. I'm very worried about the semiconductors, but more broadly, COVID brought alive to them the vulnerability of their supply chains. And this was so worrying to me because I could see, really for the first time ever, the Americans having this amber light flashing in Canada. And this amber light that said to them, you know what? The Canadian supply chain could be a vulnerability too. And that's a problem for us because there are plenty of Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, who would love any excuse to impose more protectionist measures on us. So that line to me, it jumped out at me. It made me really, really worried. And I really understood at that point that the danger wasn't just the danger of it wasn't just the immediate damage. It wasn't just the immediate harm. It wasn't, this plant loses 4 days of operation. The danger was, were we in the process as a country of doing long-term and possibly irreparable harm to our trading relationship with the United States? And it's also important to understand that our trading relationship with the United States, it's not just about Canada-US trade. It's about Canada's attractiveness as a destination for all foreign investments. Japanese car companies invest in Canada because of our trading relationship with the United States. So that one conversation was a seminal one for me. And it was a moment when I realized, as a country, somehow we had to find a way to bring this to an end.
And you were talking about, and let's be clear, they will all eventually move to crypto. Okay. A little lower down, Mr. Clerk, bottom of that page, you mentioned reputational risk. That's something you've talked about several times. Here's one of those, I think, quotable quotes. Agree with my colleagues, the reputation of Canada is at risk. Just spent a lot of time in the US last week, and we were being called a quote-unquote joke by people. I had one investor say, I won't invest another red cent in your banana republic in Canada. That adds to an already tough investment perspective on Canada. Did that have any impact on the banana republic idea? I mean, it's hyperbolic.
Well, I mean, I believe, and subsequent conversations underscore, if I were an editor, I would ask if I were still an editor, I would ask my reporter, is that a direct quote or are you paraphrasing? And I think subsequent conversations we had show that was a direct quote. And a direct quote that a Canadian bank CEO was relaying to me that he had heard on an investment trip to the US from someone who he wanted to invest in Canada. My objective was, in a succinct way, to convey to my colleagues who aren't responsible for the economy that this was a really serious economic impact. So I think that it was possible, say you're a cabinet minister, you don't have principally economic responsibilities. You might be seeing this mostly as about, damage to Ottawa shopkeepers. And that's really serious. I don't want to understate the human toll of that. But what I wanted to communicate was this is getting to have a macro impact that will be material on the Canadian economy. And the only other thing that I would say is, with hindsight, if anything, I feel that number, I feel that statement, if that's all I said there, I feel that statement understated the possible impact, because the real challenge was it was exponential. So as it happened, that trade blockade was effectively a week-long thing. And that's what statistics ended up recording. But had it gone on, then you would have seen not an arithmetic adding up the damage of week plus week plus week. I think what you would have seen, and why this really rose to the level of a profound threat to Canada's economy, was the exponential nature of it. That the longer it went on, the greater threat that the US would lose faith in us and our trading relationship would be irreparably damaged. The longer it went on, the greater the threat that foreign investors would write off Canada.
Okay.